I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for May the 21st, 2025. Certainly, there are many things which are weighing on our hearts and minds, ongoing questions involving current events, the end times, what's going to happen next, what are some of the things taking place involving Israel, Hamas, Europe, etc. And so we're going to cover a number of these things today. Our theology roundup is going to be a little different because this is a subject matter which is ongoing. I wouldn't say that it's that controversial in terms of what people are looking for involving the future end-time beast system, but it's something we have to note and it's something we have to consider as a possibility. If you will go to the Messianic Apologetics website, so messianicapologetics.net, here you see the FAQs tab and the Volume 2 tab, and there are new entries being added to the Volume 2 section all the time. Scroll down to the letter I. These are all in alphabetical order. And here you see Islamic Beast Theory. So you can click on that and then a PDF file will open up. The question is, what do you think of the Islamic Beast Theory? And this has actually been adapted from a Messianic Apologetics episode from the 3rd of November, 2021. There are many people out there who are now of the opinion. They may once have believed that for example, among the 4 beasts of Daniel 7, 1 through 8, that the last or final beast was some kind of a revived Roman Empire. Now they are of the opinion that perhaps there is some kind of an Islamic or Muslim empire, an Islamic beast to be anticipated. And indeed, when you look at any kind of symbolism in the Holy Scriptures, when you look at things describing a lion, a leopard, an eagle, here you have. After this, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it, and behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. That's from Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 through 8, not the whole passage. But, you've got these different opinions which definitely circulate involving what this could be or what this could not be. Many in the past have interpreted that as being some kind of a revived Roman Empire, perhaps manifesting in the form of the United Nations or the European Union. Now, we see a lot of people focusing on an Islamic beast. And of course, one of the biggest things which causes a lot of people to think in this direction is look at some of the big problems taking place today, particularly in the West, with this explosion of Islam. And a lot of people getting very concerned about, no-go zones in, certainly Western European cities, but also in and around different American cities. And so this is deeply distressing to a lot of people. And even I, a number of years ago, I wouldn't have been opposed to the proposition of an Islamic beast, but I was more pessimistic to it than not. Now I'm having to say, okay, while I was much more on the side of a European beast, a United Nations beast, there is a definite Islamic component to this if things don't change or get altered. But it does need to be recognized how in the past, particularly in the post-World War II world, while it was logical for many people to think about, okay, we have a European integration project after the Second World War, the European Coal and Steel Commission, then it became the European Economic Community, then the European Union. We also have the United Nations out there. It does need to be recognized that the shift on the part of many to prefer now an Islamic beast has come specifically post 9/11, post the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and now seeing, an expanse of Islam in the West. And that's very disconcerting to a lot of people. So I'm the kind of person, when it comes to prophecy, the end times, it's important to put all possibilities out on the table. I mean, you still have to follow what's taking place in the European Union, the United Nations, the Islamic world. Those are still important things to be followed. But do we actually know what the final beast is going to be? We really don't. Now, there are a number of resources, particularly some of the books by Joel Richardson, like The Islamic Antichrist, Mideast Beast, things like that. I actually met Joel Richardson back in 2015 at the MJAA Heartland Conference. We had a nice exchange. As I say here, it is hardly something that is all wet. Richardson's case was well made. And we need to keep that in mind. At the same time, we need not get overly excited, too anxious, overly predictive. We need to recognize that what some people think about the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist, the final world system, it is affected by the information available at one's disposal and how trends change in our world. And I'm going to close with reading this paragraph. I have talked about this in other presentations. There are people today, especially in parts of our Messianic community at least, who believe that Prince Charles is the anti-Messiah or Antichrist. It's now King Charles III. That was from 2021. You have got people like Joel Richardson who believe that it is going to be an Islamic anti-Messiah or Antichrist. I know someone who believes that the anti-Messiah Antichrist is going to be a Jewish Israeli. And I have even heard the possibility that the anti-Messiah Antichrist is going to be a member of the Nephilim or perhaps some kind of an extraterrestrial. So we have to keep in mind that the Islamic Beast Theory is not illegitimate. It is not all wet. It has got some significant points which need to be put on the table, but it still arises out of an interpretational history of people who are affected by current events and current politics. They read the scriptures, and they are all like, okay, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what other people before us have been missing, and now we have got it right. So with that in mind, we put possibilities on the table. We put things out there which may happen this way or that way. We are not certain, but we always have to be monitoring what is taking place in our world. And that is difficult for a lot of people to do. That is not always something people are patient about, and things can change, things can get altered. Now, I do believe we are barreling toward, in some form or fashion, an end-time world system, which is going to attempt to dominate the planet. Is Islam going to be a part of it? Look at what took place last week with Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East. The Middle Eastern world is on the rise. They want to be a major player in world events, and that is something we cannot exclude. Okay, so with that in mind, we are going to be moving immediately into our news roundup. We do the news roundup after the theology roundup because the news roundup is time sensitive. Things change. We monitor what's happening in the world. And of course, we don't always know. But we keep up to date with what is taking place. And certainly we have a lot of things to be praying about before the King of Kings. All right, so most of the news stories we're covering, these are things which I encounter passively on social media. So on venues such as Twitter or X, Facebook, Instagram. Some of you all once in a while will send something to me and I will take a look at it and pass it on. All of the links we're going through will be available for you to look at yourself when this episode is archived later today on MessianicApologetics.net. Okay. Our first story is from yesterday, the 20th of May, open source intel. The Syrian government says it handed over Eli Cohen's belongings to Israel as a gesture to ease tensions with Israel and show goodwill toward U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, if you do a little bit of homework, Cohen was an Israeli spy from the 1960s. He was executed by Syria. How sincere does this new Syrian regime want to have relations with Israel? Are they interested in joining the Abrahamic Accords? We know for certain that, like a lot of these countries, their economies are in shambles, and Donald Trump believes in peace through strength and commerce. So this is just an important thing to take note of, and how much peace, how much stability can possibly come to the Middle East through things like this. All right, our next story, and of course, I think every day we always tend to have something from Charisma, whether you like Charisma or not. This is the one news source which Messianic people across the spectrum will follow. And if something ends up in Charisma, which tends to be from more of the alternative sources, it means we can talk about it a lot more easily than not. Okay, so here's an article from Charisma. Wars and rumors of wars, 4 major conflicts that have reached the boiling point. Of course, in the Olivet Discourse, Yeshua talked about, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. The one major sign he directed his followers to look for was the abomination of desolation, but we're affected by these things no matter what. We're affected by whether or not we're going to have world peace, stability, along with that economic stability, or we're going to have tension, we're going to have a conflict which can become something major. We're affected by this. So according to this article, what are the 4 major conflicts? Israel versus Hamas. We've been following that certainly over the past year and a half. Israel versus Yemen. Okay, but we also know that Yemen is on the losing side, definitely, with this one. Some would say being bombed back into the Stone Ages. The U.S. and Israel versus Iran. We know that there are negotiations taking place to see whether or not a military conflict can be averted. And here, Russia versus NATO-backed Ukraine. That's been taking place for over 3 years now. How and why that even got started, many of us have ongoing questions about. I think also to the list, we could probably add China, Taiwan. We could probably also add India, Pakistan. There are definitely wars and rumors of wars. All right, our next intel from Open Source Intel, May the 20th. So yesterday, Israel Prime Minister's Office. Israel agrees to the American proposal for the return of the abductees based on the Witkoff outline. This proposal was recently conveyed to Hamas through the mediators, but so far it continues to adhere to its refusal. After about a week of hectic contacts in Doha, that's Qatar, the senior negotiating team will return to Israel for consultations, and working levels will remain in Doha at this stage. All right, so we continue to wait and see what's going to happen with the release of the hostages. But you have to keep in mind, this is an issue which has been going on now for a year and a half. That's how serious this is. All right, this was a sad story. I saw this when I was running errands yesterday. So this was the first thing that came across my feed. Everyone knew his name. George Wendt, famous for playing Norm Peterson in the iconic sitcom Cheers, has died. His family rep confirmed the news to the Post, New York Post, revealing that Wendt died peacefully in his sleep while at home on Tuesday morning. So a lot of us remember George Wendt from Cheers. We may also remember him, as I do, as being one of the super fans from Saturday Night Live. You know, this is Bill Schwartzky super fans. I'm his brother Bab Schwartzky, as my brother Bill is recovering from another heart attack. Remember that? That's coming across a lot of social media right now, but this is just sad. And he does look like he was obese and probably not in the best of health. This also came across my feed yesterday while I was running errands. Kay Arthur has passed away. Our beloved co-founder Kay Arthur went to be with the Lord this morning, May the 20th, 2025. In the late 1960s, Kay and her husband Jack started leading Bible studies from their living room. Over the past 55 years, that small outreach has grown into an international ministry, discipling millions through Scripture. Many of you are doubtlessly familiar with inductive Bible study techniques. I was trained in inductive Bible study techniques at Asbury Seminary. I had to take inductive Bible study on Matthew, inductive Bible study on Acts, and later inductive Bible study on Exodus. So very familiar with a lot of the Bible study techniques pioneered by Kay Arthur. And this is just a sign that, you know, a lot of people who impacted in a positive way American evangelicalism and the faith across the world in the 1980s and the 1990s mainly, they're passing on. And this is not something I think which is going to be a positive thing. You know, even though a lot of us have, as Messianics, you know, we've got questions about the Christian legacy, our Christian theological and spiritual heritage. Kay Arthur made a positive impact more often than not, and a lot of us benefited from the inductive Bible study method. From Charlie Kirk, although this is circulating on many other platforms now, this is from yesterday afternoon. President Trump announces the Golden Dome missile defense system. It will be capable of intercepting missiles launched from the other side of the world, and even if they're launched from space. The new system is to be ready in 3 years. Now, we monitor whatever Donald Trump, whatever he's doing, whatever he associates with the golden age of America, the word gold or golden, and here the Golden Dome missile defense system. This is something which is believed to be loosely based or highly based on Israel's Iron Dome system, and it is to protect the American homeland from any missiles launched from another part of the world. And of course, along with that, the one concern we should definitely have is, what are you going to do about Iran? Because Iran isn't just interested in possibly firing on the little state of Israel. It's interested possibly in going after countries like America, the great Satan. But I do think from this, Donald Trump's emphasis on a golden age, is it so much that, he is paving the way for the beast? He may even be the beast himself. Or is it more wanting to emphasize things like economic stability, paying down the national debt, wanting to provide security, and indeed paving more the way for perhaps some kind of interim period of peace and safety, peace and security, peace and prosperity, what Paul alluded about to the Thessalonians, and then sudden destruction comes. All right, so this is an interesting story from the Times of Israel, actually from the 19th of May. Leo tells Jewish leaders dialogue must continue amid interreligious conflict. A lot of questions abound about the new Pope, Leo the 14th. Is he going to be a friend of Israel, a friend of the Jewish people? Is he going to be Francis II? Is he going to be more a John Paul III? What is he going to be? Here we see that meeting with religious leaders in a special audience in the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV says that Jewish-Christian dialogue must continue even in times of conflicts and misunderstandings. Because of the Jewish roots of Christianity, all Christians have a special relationship with Judaism, says the newly installed pontiff. The theological dialogue between Christians and Jews remains ever important and close to my heart. Even in these difficult times, marked by conflicts and misunderstandings, it is necessary to continue the momentum of this precious dialogue of ours. Now, it is true that there are a number of Messianic Jewish leaders, more on the UMJC side of the spectrum than not, who have been involved in Messianic Jewish Roman Catholic dialogue. I'm providing that only as information. It is something which has been met with some degree of controversy, if not hostility, by others. The real issue for me is a figure like Leo XIV, the new Pope. Is he going to be accelerating the end time scenario or decelerating it? Mainly because a lot of people associate the figure of the Roman Catholic Pope with the false prophet of the book of Revelation. So we don't know if the false prophet is going to be a pope. It's not required. But we know that whenever a new pope comes into the Vatican, changes do take place. And all of us, because the world has 1.5 billion Catholics, are affected by it in some way. All right, our next story from Open Source Intel on May the 20th, so yesterday. Public statement: disregard the noise. Reports claiming Trump will abandon Israel over the Gaza war or is losing patience are pure fiction. So here we go. Here's the reality. Trump made it clear, if all the hostages don't return, Gaza will face the gates of hell, and he meant it. U.S. weapons continue flowing into Israel without pause. The American aid distribution system in Gaza begins May the 24th. The U.S. ambassador to Israel just recently reaffirmed American support for Israel and said to ignore the reports which have an agenda. U.S. envoy Adam Baylor yesterday said the new Israeli offensive is expected to help bring more hostages home. Yes, there are occasional policy disagreements, but nothing close to a rupture. These stories are designed to fracture U.S.-Israel unity, amplified by elements of the Israeli left, desperate to trade anything and everything for a deal. Don't fall for it. Okay, so we're going to hear conflicting reports about what's happening, the Israeli conflict in Gaza. There is a left wing in Israel, just like there's a left wing in every country. What do they want? What does the Israeli government in power want? What does the Trump administration want? Yes, there's always going to be bumps along the road, disagreements. How big are those disagreements? Are some of the headlines just designed to get clicks, just designed to sell newspapers? We just wait and monitor. Now, this is something to take serious. Breaking: the EU announces it will review its association agreement with Israel. In place since 2000, it has created a free trade area in certain industrial goods and scientific cooperation within the EU's Horizon Europe program. 17 countries voted for, while 10 were against. You can expect to see some changes take place in the relationship of the state of Israel toward Europe and the European Union. That is hardly a surprise, because it is in Europe where you have the Islamic problem concentrate. And with that in mind, this was an interesting post from Nio Berg, her channel on X. Prediction: Israel will slowly move away from being a Western-aligned country and focus towards working with Arab nations via the Abraham Accords. And to be honest, it makes more sense, because at the end of the day, Israel is a Middle Eastern country, not a Western one. Now, that is interesting, because even though this is commentary, it's an observation, it's an opinion. How, and we have discussed this, how do we not know that what's happening with the Abraham Accords, it's well-intentioned, it wants to see peace through strength and peace through commerce? How do we know it's not going to bring about some kind of a, I'm going to say this loosely, I wouldn't say genuine level of peace, but sincere level of peace? And then, of course, what will happen? The anti-Messiah, Antichrist, he will confirm all of these things. He'll confirm the Abraham Accords or something like that. And then some addendum, some new memorandum will come about, which will be for a 7-year period, which will then be broken in the middle of it. We just have to consider possibilities. Okay, we've got 3 more stories to go through. This is from open source intel, and this is something you probably have already seen circulating for a while. CNN leak. The U.S. has intelligence indicating Israel is preparing to strike Iranian nuclear facilities despite the Trump administration's diplomatic efforts with Tehran. It concludes with, however, Israel lacks the capacity for a major strike without U.S. support, and the U.S. is unlikely to assist without significant provocation. Talks with Iran are stalled over uranium enrichment, with no breakthrough expected soon. Israel may act unilaterally if it perceives a U.S.-Iran deal as inadequate, though this risks straining U.S. relations. I have so many questions, and as do we all. Yeah, this is an ongoing matter, and it's one of these different hot spots, wars and rumors of wars. This is very concerning. This came in this morning, May the 21st, from open source intel. Breaking: the UK has pledged to recognize a Palestinian state at a UN conference scheduled for June. So, okay, here we have one potential major country, the United Kingdom. Are they going to recognize a Palestinian state at a UN conference in June? What other countries? I don't know. Some of those who recently came out against Israel, France, Canada, others. Are they going to recognize a Palestinian state? Is there even going to be a conference in June? We know the momentum is building regarding this Israel-Gaza conflict. We definitely know that. And certainly some of the European powers, countries like Canada, they have seemingly reached the end of their patience regarding how long is Israel going to conduct activities in Gaza. That is indisputable right now. And our final story from End Time Headlines today. So this is picking up on what we just looked through from open source intel. New intelligence reveals Israel preparing possible strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. The U.S. has obtained new intelligence suggesting that Israel is making preparations to strike Iranian nuclear facilities, even as the Trump administration has been pursuing a diplomatic deal with Tehran. Multiple U.S. officials familiar with the latest intelligence told CNN. So, yeah, this is concerning to us. And if Israel decides in their own national interest to unilaterally take out Iranian nuclear facilities, what is that going to do to the Middle East situation, Gaza situation, its relations with Western Europe, its relations with the United States. We don't know, but we know from past history, Israel did this with Iraq, and relations were later patched up. But we have a lot of things to pay attention to, and I think that is something which we often don't focus on sufficiently. I don't know what your local Messianic congregation or synagogue does every week. A number of them actually do go through, certain news highlights, not what we're doing, but hey, we need to pray for this, we need to pray for that. Others don't pay attention to it. Some people believe that we are, on the precipice of the last days, of the precipice of the 70th week of Israel, Great Tribulation. Others are pre-tribulationists, and they think they're going to get beamed out when the going gets rough. So you have all these dynamics. We want to make sure that we are paying attention to these things with a calm and level head, interceding before the Lord for his people, the Messianic Jewish community in Israel, the Christian community in the Middle East, believers all around the world who are having to deal with this Islamic challenge, the Messianic community, which is still mainly found in the diaspora. And of course, we also have to navigate not only the news, but also our theological future. And that, I think, that's what gets me upset more than anything else, because I still have to struggle with how there are issues which theologically could have been addressed, could have been talked about at my late father's Sunday school class back in 1987 to 1992, and still cannot be easily discussed today in the Messianic community. But the Lord is in charge, he is in control. And the reason we have Messianic Insider 5 times a week now is so we can have an ongoing conversation, and that important things don't fall through the cracks. So with that in mind, thank you for joining us today. And once again, all of the links we've gone through, you can be able to access those at messianicapologetics.net when this episode is archived. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.